I'm going to hand straight over to our host, Mark Francis. Hope you enjoy the session, everybody.
So hi, everybody. Imagine, if you can, you're at a wedding and you are the first speaker, because this is what happened last Saturday. And the first speaker in this case was the father of the bride. And he was particularly nervous. And he was nervous for three reasons. And I know that because I asked him after his speech. And I said to him, what were you nervous about? And he said, there were three things that made me particularly nervous. The first is that I haven't spoken for years in front of a group of people. So just the occasion is a big thing for me. The second is I'm giving my daughter away formally, officially, legally, and she's my only daughter. And that makes me a little bit nervous. And he said, and the third reason is, unfortunately, I've been suffering for the last 9 years with Parkinson's. And that affects me physically, but it also affects my ability to speak clearly. And this is what he said. I had the privilege to be there in the moment my beautiful daughter was born. And I held her in my arms. And I gazed into her eyes and I said, please, Lord, can she be just like my stunning wife? And everyone in the audience, as you can imagine, sighed. We went, ah. Oh. He then described the main characteristics of his wife, which were largely incredibly positive, and then towards the end became a little bit less positive, and everybody laughed. And he paused, and he said, on second thoughts, can you be just like me? And everybody laughed. And he described his characteristics, his main personality traits. And the more he spoke, the less positive he was about himself. And then everybody laughed. And he paused. And he said, on third thoughts, Lord, could you make her exactly like you in your own image, so kind and generous and loving? And everybody in equal measure sighed and smiled and laughed and cried. And I have to say, like I said to Michael at the time afterwards, my goodness me, that's how you present. That's how you do it. You had us captivated from your very first word. You spoke at a pace that was gloriously digestible. You know, every moment we were hanging on, what's the next word that's going to be spoken? You spoke straight from your heart to our heart with an authenticity which just landed, right? You could feel it in the room. We were so with Michael as he spoke. And if you didn't know that he was suffering from a really debilitating illness, you might not have noticed anything. But if you were watching Michael, you could see that there were physical signs that he was suffering from some sort of physically impairing illness and also verbally impairing. 9 years of Parkinson sadly does that to you. So there was an element where if you were watching Michael, there was an empathy where you felt, my goodness me, this is even more astonishing because of how he is and what life has dealt him. And so, frankly, that's how to present. That's how to do it. It's to understand this message is important, but so is my audience. And I want to land my message in a way that truly connects. And Michael certainly did that. Now, today, I've got 3 separate sections for you, and each of them lasts about 10 minutes. So the entire session is a maximum of around 40 minutes, maximum. And at the end, if you're so open to it, we can share with you 1 or 2 things you might want to do with or without Uspire to help you on your journey. That's your call. But what I would ask you to do is, as you listen, and I know some people are listening on their own, and some people are in a room with a number of their teammates, which is really cool. It's a nice idea. I'd like you just to think very self-orientated for a moment. And as I share both examples, and I'm going to do a bit of a rant, to be honest, about how passionate I am about presentation and how often I see it done so badly, it's scary. I'd like you to think about oh and so. Now, this ideally is something you tangibly do, write it down. But even if you do it in your head, it's not a bad idea. And that is when you hear something, see something that triggers for you the sort of, oh, that's a good point. I might do something with that. Capture the O. And then if you've got a solution, or I might say something during each of the 10-minute slots that triggers the tip of what you might do, then put it in the so what. So the oh so is a decent way to capture learning for you personally as we go along. So rant number 1. And I've put them visually here, 3 rants about presentation. I've had the great good fortune in my life. In my commercial career, I was a salesperson mainly at different levels. And then in my last 20 years, I've been a consultant. So I work all over the world in multiple industries. And I'm delighted to see some of my customers on this call. Thank you for joining. And I've also many different industries. So I therefore see presentation pretty much every day of my life, either face-to-face or online. I see presentation. And oh my goodness, without exception, I see this. And that is wordy slides. Wordy slides. Slides with lots of words on them. And the presenter then basically talks to the words that are on the slide. Can you stop doing that, please? Please stop doing that, because it's nonsense when you think about it. If you want me to read, send it to me, I'll read it. And now here's a quiz question, and I'm going to ask a quiz question in each of the 10-minute slots because it's relevant, the answer's relevant to what I'm ranting about. Here's the quiz question. In terms of the receptors in our brain for communication, so how we receive communication, how you're receiving my communication now, what percentage of the receptors in our brains is for the visual sense? So not the auditory, not the kinesthetic feeling sense, but just the visual sense. What percentage of the receptors in our brains, and if you could use chat to have a good guess on this, that would be really cool. So I'm looking at my chat now. What percentage of the receptors in our brains are visual? What do you think that number is? 40? Yeah, Marco's saying 5%. Helen's saying maybe 70%. 10%, Carolina. Alex, 5. Yeah, you know, we're a lovely range here. Thank you, lovely range. Here's the deal. Here's the answer. It's over 90%. It's over 90% of the receptors in our brain is for the visual cues. Now, what does that mean? To do with my rant now, I'm saying don't have wordy slides. Here's why you should not have wordy slides. There's many reasons, actually, not least that it frustrates me when I see them. Our brains are wired for visual more than anything else. So if you put a slide up when you are talking, the audience automatically reads the slide and you're talking, which means they're not listening. They are reading what you've said, or they're looking at what you've said. So that is no longer a visual aid. In fact, it's unhelpful to have a slide while you're talking. So there are so many messages for you around that. And as we think about what's the solution to wordy slides, one of them is understand the impact when you put any slide up. People's brain naturally goes to the visual more than the auditory. That's a hugely important message. The next quiz question in the next section is totally relevant to this as well, about how many words do people remember when you present? How many and what do people remember when you present? So, of course, we want to present with impact. So how do we do that when we talk about visual aids? Now, I'm going to move this down. And actually, the answer is often very logical. Instead of just words on a slide, do something visual because of those visual cues, but also be careful with words that you choose. So on this slide, I'm talking to my audience about, we've had a tough time, there's a dip, we're in where that red cross is, but we're just about to take off. So that's what I want you to see visually, but notice the heading is not a one word, something like forecast or progress or projection. It's not a one word dull heading. It's an indicative heading that leads you to the visual. We are ready to grow. So the words lead us, the visual leads us, and by the way, it sticks in our brain because we have 90% visual cues in terms of sensory reception of message. So I make sure that visual reinforces what I'm then going to say. But also, how would I introduce the slide? Well, I wouldn't just, as most people do, this is a fourth rant, this is a bonus rant, it's they put the slide up before they start speaking. Please stop doing that. Because two things happen. The flow of what you're saying stops, and people now are slide-based. They're not story-based, they're slide-based now. So up goes the slide, it's your cue, wrong decision. And you go, oh yes, growth in 2023. Oh yes, I now remember what I was going to say. Stop doing that. Start introducing the visual aid. So if my message is ready to grow, I say something that introduces that message and I use the visual aid to land the message. So I might say something like, so where do we stand now in terms of our sales performance? Question-based introduction. Click, slide comes up. I stay silent. Everyone looks at that slide. I breathe. I wait until people are looking at me again. And then I say, we're ready now. We're ready to grow. So my words are congruent with the message. And I've worked hard at the heading. I've simplified the visual. And then I land my message verbally as well. That is congruent presentation. I'm hoping as well, it's super straightforward. It's relatively simple to understand and therefore relatively easy for all of us to apply. So here's the end of this first rant. Why is it then, if this is so logical and so obvious, why is it that most people don't present like that? That most people present like the wordy slides? Why is that? I'd love you to come up with some answers in chat. I'll give you some of mine in terms of fundamentally, I think we've got the wrong role models. I think most of the presenters, I'll come back to that, Lisa, great point about confidence. I think most presenters follow other presenters, right? Most presenters present with lots of slides with lots of words on them. So I think it's role models. We don't have many brilliant role models. Comments around confidence is super important. Thanks, Lisa, for starting us off on that. Because I'm not confident, I'm going to put lots of words on the slide, and it's my crutch as a presenter. Stop doing that, because it does two things. Number one, it's not your crutch. It makes you speak too much, and it makes you read words off a slide. Disastrous. Stop doing that. Second, it's not audience-centric, because audiences want to be inspired by a speech or a presentation. They don't want to go through a rigmarole of reading stuff. But if confidence is the issue, that's something we need to work on. The solution, if it's confidence, is simplification and practice. So wordy slides are not simple, they're complex. The minute you put up a complex slide, you feel obliged to talk to it. Simplify, simplify, simplify. So that's my top tip to rant one, is find visual slides. Make them congruent with your verbal message and introduce them as part of a flow, which is natural rather than click. Oh yes, that's what I was going to talk to you about. Blah, blah, blah. Another reason it's just been posted, just a bit lazy. I agree with that. I think because we're in that sort of mode of, I've been asked to present a marketing strategy, so I'll just put some slides together lazily. I think that's a really good point. It's one of the reasons why we do it. So this is conscious excellence and helping ourselves by not having wordy slides. That's rant number one. Rant number two, and actually I think some of the reasons are connected to what you've already said. Why do we, when we're in a presentation, particularly one-to-many, why do we go yada, 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 yada? Why do we machine gun our audience with information and facts and stats? And this is a rant, by the way, because understanding how you land messages, what you should not do, particularly as normally we're the expert in the topic, that's why we're presenting it. I know so much, I want to tell you everything. So I'm going to tell you everything, and I'm going to tell you everything in a very short space of time because there's lots to say, right? I'm going to tell you lots of things. You've given me half an hour for the presentation, and my goodness me, I've got 14 brands in the portfolio. So I'm going to give you every single one of those brands, strategy, tactics, reason for being, and the communication message to our external audience, which, by the way, I'll give you a detailed profile about. No, I can put myself in the number of presentations when I've done that, and it's actually embarrassing. It's embarrassing to just go yardie, yardie, yardie. So here's the quiz question. And when I found this out fairly recently, or the answer to it, I just stopped for a moment and had a word with myself. Here is the question. And this comes from a detailed survey of multiple presentations to audience, 1-to-1, 1-to-2, 1-to-many, multiple examples. Here's the question. On average, after 1 hour beyond the end of your presentation, 1 hour beyond the end of your presentation, on average, what percentage of what you have said is remembered? So using chat for me, 1 hour after you've presented, by the way, this will be about 2 o'clock for you, remembering my presentation, what percentage of the words are remembered 1 hour later? So Marco is saying 10%, Torben is saying 10%, that's pretty cool. It's a good start, actually, you're not far off. Any other bids? Now that I've told you you're not far off with 10%. The answer, notice I'm using visual messaging rather than verbal, but just in case you can't see the picture, the answer is 7%. And there was me thinking I was a brilliant presenter because I spoke at my audience with enthusiasm and cleverness and passion, and 7%. 1 hour later. Okay, back to the rant. So should I be machine gunning anyone with lots of information? No, I shouldn't. And also, how much information should I share? Now, if the answer is you're not going to remember much, goodness me, I'm going to restrict what I say, quantity of what I say. I'm not going to tell you 10 things in half an hour. I'm not going to do it. I would just be bombarding you, hence machine gun analogy, with so much information that it kind of goes over your head, even if intellectually you like everything I say, because our brains go, oh. There's no way in the world, if you give people 45 O's, that you're going to get any so what's. It'll be a bombardment. It just won't stick, right? Hence the machine gun analogy. So,
Voilà.
think about your audience, about how you want the message to land in the brains, in the different parts of the brain, the frontal cortex, both in terms of intellect and emotion. How do I want my message to land? And actually, I want the big message to explode, metaphorically, in the person's brain. I want them to trigger interest, engagement in topic, idea creation, decision-making, analysis. I want to do all of that with one key message. And therefore, I need to reduce the number of main messages that I want to get to really come to life in your brain. Maybe 1 or 2. In this session, it's actually 3 main messages. It's don't do wordy slides, land main message bombs. And it's also, well, you can see it, can't you? Breathe, breathe. Pause, let the message land. Decide what it is. Focus on your audience. What message do they need me to talk about? What problem do they need me to solve? And what's the solution? That's probably the whole presentation. And I know I've got salespeople on this call. I've got a team from the printing industry is on this call. And right now, selling contracts to people who want to print documents is unbelievably difficult. You know that, you're on the call, but I'm just choosing one industry. It's unbelievably difficult because, well, several reasons. Number one, we're distracted by life. Number two, supply chain issues. Number three, cost of living. Laughably, if you're in the UK, laughably, our government has told us it's 9% inflation. Well, if you're anything like my cost base as an individual, there's nothing near a single digit inflation. And if you're in the print industry, the cost of print has more than doubled in the last 6 months. The cost of paper has more than doubled. And electricity, if you're in a big printing business, has more than trebled. That's a bomb. So I shut up. So I'm selling now in an industry, whichever one, I've chosen one as an example, where selling is more difficult than it has ever been. And therefore, at the point at which I've earned the right to present a solution, hence presenting with impact, oh boy, have I got to be good. Have I got to be so good? So good that actually it's worth bearing in mind the solutions to the rants that I'm talking about. I've got to be on the money, haven't I? I've got to have not many messages. They have to be all connected to pain points, which I have gathered through research or through brilliant questioning. And the solution better be relevant to that particular pain point and that particular customer. And that lends itself to, I can't have too many of those. I don't need too many of those. But I want them to start to resonate significantly in the brain of my audience. So how do you do that? When you prepare your presentation or your sales pitch or your case for change, or indeed your update, we use at Uspire, we use the ABCD method. That's what we do. And it's this. And this is a very deliberate visual, by the way, simple, but very deliberate. The natural behavior by us as human beings, professionals, is I believe I've got to do a presentation or a pitch, and my whole brain goes to, what am I going to say? What's the content that I need to deliver to this audience? Yeah, I'll get a slide deck together and I'll start putting slides together. Rant number one applies. The slides are going to be wordy because I've got so much to say. Stop doing that. And because I've got so much to say, I'm going to speak really fast when I present. Stop doing that. And if you give me half an hour, I'm going to fill half an hour. Because you give me half an hour, I'm going to plan for a half an hour presentation. Stop doing that. It's madness. So how do you stop? You think about your audience. You think about your audience. So I work a lot in medical device industry, and the audience is clinicians and nurses and doctors. And right now, if you're a clinician, a nurse, or a doctor, your last 2 years has been a living nightmare. And if you're not physically completely exhausted, mentally, you're definitely completely exhausted. So that's your audience, right? It's already changing my content. I did plan 10 bombs. I've now only got one. And it's against the pain point you said. That has changed that fundamentally because I put myself in your shoes. Audience first. Next, and this is really neat, this one, the B stands for behavior. When I'm speaking and presenting, what do I want them to do? What do I want my audience to do? That's the B of behavior. Do I want them to participate? Do I want them to ask questions? Do I want them to smile broadly? Do I want them to look at me? Those are behaviors. Plan that. Because if you want that, you can adapt your style and your content to the behavior you're trying to inspire during the presentation and the behaviors beyond it. I want them to pick up the phone and say, can you come and be our print provider, please, Stevens and George, the best print company in Britain, Stevens and George, based in Merthyr, fabulous factory with incredibly high costs at the moment. So please buy more printing from Stevens and George, salespeople on the call. So changes that fundamentally, doesn't it? Changes, do I even use slides? Because it might detract from my message. Do I use slides? Question. Maybe not. Maybe I do something else. Now, there's something else we're going to talk about now in rant number 3. Rant number 3, and I've sort of alluded to it already, is I fill the time you've given me. I fill it, right? So you've got a 1-hour presentation. Right, I'm going to fill that. I'm going to plan to speak for 60 minutes. Most presentations I see do that. Most, probably 80 or 90%. There's a bit of a rush going on because what happens is I plan to present at my audience with no response. And I'm quite good at the start, and I start to get responses and I start to get questions and interaction. And suddenly my 60-minute plan is a 70-minute or an 80-minute. And I think to myself, I'm going to need to speed up. And so I do the machine gun routine. You can see how these are all connected, can't you? So rant number 3 is don't even think about filling the time you're given. Don't even think about it, let alone plan to fill it. If I'm given a 20-minute presentation, plan for 10, about half, that would be my tip. Plan for about half. That would be my tip. And then have flexibility that if that half is getting challenged, you've got flexibility to come back to the main message that you wanted to give anyway. Repeat one main message rather than try to give 10 fast. So trying to fill it is a really big thing. And what happens, and it's happened to me so many times, I'm sure it's happened to everyone on the call. What happens is you start to get tense. So my question in chat is this: when you're nervous or you're tense and you start to exhibit anxiety, what specifically happens to your breathing? So mentally, you're not enjoying it, you're anxious, you're feeling stress, it's not going well. What happens to your breathing? Speeds up, definitely. Becomes shallow, you're absolutely right. It can speed up and it can become incredibly shallow. Effectively, what happens is that we breathe badly. It's shallow, it might be quick, but it is definitely not deep. And so the top tip, and you can already see it, when you're trying to speak fast, when you're trying to fill the agenda and your brain is starting to speed up and maybe your breath is shallow and fast, consciously start breathing deeply. So that is a big deep breath, which your audience can't see. So I'm going to do it now. And you tell me if you can see it. This is a really big deep breath. Ready to go. Now I did it all through my nose, and physically you might have seen my eyes going a bit screw-whiff, but effectively I'm using breathing to calm my brain pattern. And when I've calmed my brain pattern, my voice level's gone down a bit. I didn't consciously do that, but because I've more visibly given you a big deep breath, my brain pattern slowed down. The pace of my speaking has slowed down a bit and the tone has dropped a bit. All of those are good for an audience. They're also really good for me because physiologically, I'm starting to feel better, right? More relaxed, a little bit more natural. The body's a little bit less tense. I've still got the adrenaline of presenting to an audience, which is a good, healthy thing. But I'm not stressed now because I've given my body more oxygen and my brain more oxygen. It's also a glorious chance to reflect and go again. And in my experience, when I consciously breathe, it also means my next words are sharper. So if I'm speaking quickly, My words are always okay. I've taught myself to get rid of filler words like and and obviously. And as you know, all of that stuff that is wasting energy and wasting space. I've taught myself not to do that. And the way is breathe between main sentences. Breathe to pause once you've landed a big one. So the cost of electricity in a printing factory has gone up more than 3 times in less than 6 months. Breathe. I want that to land in your brains. I want you to start to think, my goodness me, how would I manage that? I'm glad I'm not in that industry, but wait a minute, my industry has the same cost pressures. Maybe it's travel pressure, fuel costs, that is massively impacting our cost base and therefore our price aspiration. But how willing are my audience to accept a price rise? Oh, I need to think about all of that. Good. That's what I wanted that bomb to do to your brains, is get you to think and engage in what I've just said in a totally different way, which is far more interactive. So, 3 main messages today about how you present with impact. I've tried to bring in some examples. I've tried to bring in a bit of a rant as well, because I've reached that stage in life where when I'm presented at and I feel like my time is being wasted, inside, I stay mature on the outside, but inside I just get unbelievably frustrated. If you're going to use wordy slides, just send them to me and I don't have to turn up on the Zoom meeting. I don't. I'll just read them in my own time and I kind of get the message. If you want to machine gun me, I'm going to switch off. I'm probably going to pick one of the key messages and then I'm going to go off into my own world, taking notes and making decisions. I'm not listening to you anymore. Definitely not. And the third one, of course, is filling my time with too much stuff. Again, you've landed the message. I'm working on that. I'm not listening anymore. So the opportunity to change is significant. And what I'd love you to do is now just take 90 seconds with yourselves. If you haven't already done this, to reflect now, what are some of the main, that might be relevant to me. What are some of the main ones, even if you only pick 2 or 3? And so what you're going to do, and this is for yourselves, by the way, it's not on chat. This is absolutely for yourselves. Main messages that have landed, and what are you going to do? 90 seconds of silence from me. Off you go. So in a moment, I will invite in chat just what one thing will make the biggest difference for you in a moment. So you can be thinking about that. What one thing could make a really big difference to you as a presenter from what you've heard and observed? So I'm going to ask you to think about that, and we'll share that in chat. Before we do, I just want to share with you a couple of thoughts to keep triggering your thinking about you as an excellent presenter. One of them is this wonderful dynamic we have now called online presenting, because we're doing it quite a lot, right? I'm probably doing it every single day of my working life now. I'm doing some presentations online. So how do we show up online? That's important. And you may notice that I've been standing up, but also the camera is slightly above my eye level. And yes, you do get to ask a question. You do get to ask a question. Thank you for putting that in chat. I'll get questions next, okay? You may have noticed my camera is slightly higher than eye level. I've changed this, got some great advice from Dave Thomas, who's a brilliant presenter. And he said, camera slightly higher. And the reason is, first of all, I'm now looking, it looks like I'm looking at you, but also there's no chance I'm looking down on you. I'm actually looking up. See my fingers pointing up from my eye level? So it's probably about 1 centimeter higher. And that means it feels like we're completely on the same level. That is vital. So is having a clear, well-lit face. And so we've got and this is a Uspire model, that get your framing right. I'm 2/3 up and it's about the right distance. I'm nearly 1 meter away from my camera. Get your lighting right, get the audio right. Make sure your message is good, land your bombs, and bring an energy. I'm standing up to bring an energy to an audience, one to many. So be aware of how you show up. It's simply vital, because more than 90% of the message received is a visual one. So if you show up slightly dark or looking down, you're missing the idea completely. So what question do we have? Do you want to verbalize that question?
Hi, yes.
Hi.
My question is, what do you do? I know that you're saying that the audience is very important, but what do you do when you do have a mixed audience, where you have people that are looking for data and people are looking for storytelling and people are looking for calls to action? So when it's really varied.
Fantastic question, Barbara. Brilliant. I love that. The answer may sound simple. It's not. You've got to prepare differently, I think, or even better. And the answer is you give them everything you've just described. You give them everything, right? I mean, I think if you don't tell a story, notice I told a story right at the start. Right at the start. You know? So Chris said, I'm handing over to Mark now. And I said, last Saturday, imagine what it would have felt like to be the first speaker at a wedding. You're the father of the bride. So straight into story. I would always recommend you tell customer relevant stories, always. However, your question is so clever, because that's not enough. You've got some people in your audience who want detail, they want substance, and they probably want evidence and a record. So make sure you give that. Say you're going to do it. You know, at the end of this presentation, I will send everyone the presentation, or I'll send a short video that brings to life what I've just shared. You've also got different character types in your audience, so play to that. We use color energies a lot within our business, and that is just one method of establishing how we're all gloriously different. And so you should absolutely play to an audience that wants results. They want data. They want to feel engaged, and people energy, and they also want some big ideas. Those are 4 different character types. So play to all of those in your audience if it's one to many, for sure. Are there any other questions? Yes, Lisa.
Hello, nice to see you again.
Nice to see you.
When I was at Jaguar Land Rover, we had to do a 3-slide maximum presentation, and it could be for contracts that were worth 50 million, because you're expected to know it. And when I went into my next role, which, well, you and I know each other from, I went to present in exactly that way, 3 slides, and my line manager at the time had an absolute fit because there weren't enough words on the page. I tried to explain that I knew it and I was going to talk about it and I had notes, etc. But there was a lack of confidence in my line manager that I was going to present in a way that I felt more comfortable with, but that the line manager wasn't comfortable with because she didn't feel she was getting all the information. How would you address that? Because not all of us work for ourselves or are necessarily leaders. We still have to convince people internally as well as externally that this is a good idea.
Yeah, and my brain does go to solution. You know me well enough. I go to the red energy goes, right, here's the answer. It isn't the only answer, but one to reflect on is you create a fuller presentation. If it's a slide based, which often it is in business, you create a fuller presentation, which you do either send in advance, during or afterwards. But to a line manager, I'd send it in advance. Here is the full story and the full messaging. And then when the presentation comes, I'm presenting only 3 slides. So that isn't extra work because all of your thinking is in that first internal presentation, reassuring the line manager you have a complete understanding and it's a brilliant story message. And then when you deliver it, be much more concise, only have 2 or 3 bombs, only have 2 or 3 slides, if you need slides at all.
Great advice, thank you.
So it's both. And particularly in super big corporations, which we have customers of that nature, global customers, it's almost expected that the slide deck is kind of intellectually rigorous, right? Yeah, internally you can have that, but the customer's not going to be bored like that. And they're also not interested in that much detail in most cases, We've got time for one last question because I'm conscious of giving you back significant amount of time, which is also good presentation skill. We blocked an hour. This is going to be a maximum of 47 minutes if my planning's any good. So one more question, if anyone has another question you'd like to ask. I'm going to give you one more tip, kind of 2 more actually. One of the things I verbalized earlier, and it wasn't a bomb, it was a bit of a machine gun consciously, but I want to make it a little bit more of a bomb in your minds. And that's what's my structure? What's my structure? And your structure should depend on your intention and outcome. And therefore it's different depending. So here's 3 different structures we'd recommend. Am I updating a key stakeholder, whether they're internal or external? In which case it's an update structure. Am I pitching? Am I selling? In which case it's a sales pitch structure. Or is it a major case for change? In which case it's a slightly fuller structure. And those who are interested, we can give you the details of 3 very distinctly different structures to get a different outcome or land a different message. So that's one thing that's really important. And in all of my business career, when I was trained on presentation skills, I was told, here's the structure. You must use this structure. This is our structure. Use the same for everyone. Well, there's 3 different reasons to present. It should have 3 different structures. So that's an element to consider. And the last one, and it's connected to what people said about confidence, is understanding there are elements of how you present, which are about competence. And we use 6. And these help understand why you're particularly good, but also why you might need to be better. And there are 6 elements of gravitas. And one of the signs that we're not confident is a lack of stillness and ease. If our brain is working 100 miles an hour, including, I'm hating this, I just want to get it over with, our brain is not still, and therefore our messaging is not impactful. But ease is also about physical ease. You know, I'm uncomfortable people looking at me, and that physical dis-ease means my words are clumsy as well. And is my action just instinctive or is it purposeful? Do you remember I gave the answer in percentage terms like that? Only 7% of the message is remembered. The message we gave as a presenter is remembered an hour later, which is scary. And these last 2 ones I wanted to talk about, because if you can bring authenticity and enjoyment, that will be seen and felt through your energy as a presenter. And these 2 E's are simply crucial, because if you're not comfortable when you present, we, your audience, know it. And then we're not comfortable and our listening mode changes. Our brains become unstill and we start to do things like worry about you, feel sorry for you, get frustrated. If you're like me, a bit of a ranter, I'll be ranting in my head. Oh, they could have prepared better for this. Why haven't they done that? Why are the slides so wordy? Why have they not introduced the slide? All the things I talked about before. So our intention in this session was to really trigger your brains around what you could do different or even better, and given you the so. Do you remember I said in the oh so? Could you put in chat one thing that you are definitely going to do, try, or even stop doing, like wordy slides? So in chat, just to get a nice completion to this learning journey, what one thing are you going to start doing or stop doing or do better as a result of this session? So using chat, and then the final words from me. So using chat, what one thing less slides. Don't plan to fill the whole time. Well done. Much more selective about the facts. Breathe instead of filling words. Yeah, this is massive, Sasha. Connect with energy. Yeah, that's rehearsable energy, by the way. It's rehearsable. Breathe to relax. Pause before the message I want to land. Pause before it and after it. Really smart. The machine gun tendency, Mr. Pittman, certainly. Spend even more time practicing is really smart, Andrew. Yeah, Barb's going to do it all better. Of course we are. Smile and look connected. Yeah, that works for me. That works for me. So just a final message from me about this. And in terms of from Uspire as a business, we're passionate about making a difference, which is why we run these Discovery Days. We have another one on July the 14th, and my brilliant colleague Chester's going to run that. And it's about personal brand. It is a brilliant session. It is 1 hour long on July the 14th. Book that in your diary, please. And also in chat, Joe very kindly has put a link to, if you would like to invest more of your time and energy into being a better presenter and you would like our help. In the link, there's a special offer to do something like that. Absolutely delighted to work with you one-to-one or one-to-many. And most of all, I just want to say a huge thank you for giving up your time just to listen to me. It's hugely appreciated.